This is a 5-minute video from Playful Learning Games all about commas in Key Stage 2. Thinking about what commas are taught in Key Stage 2, what does it all mean, and then how do we teach it in a fun and play-based way. Here we go. So, the different uses of commas. There's roughly about 5 different uses of commas that children from Key Stage 2 onwards will start learning about. Separating items in a list, probably the easiest one. To indicate parenthesis within a sentence. To separate direct speech from a reporting clause. To avoid ambiguity, and to separate a main and a subordinate clause. So we're going to go through each 5 and I'm going to give you some examples of each and a game that you could play to kind of reinforce this with your children. So, to separate items in a list, examples of that could be, could you get me some milk, bread, eggs and flour please? And then also you can have items in a list where you've got some adjectives to describe something. For example, the cat had long, sharp claws. So, a quick game that you could play to try and reinforce this and to help children understand how to use commas in this way would be to grab 3 post-it notes from around the room. So you will have pre-prepared some post-it notes with some objects or items written on them and stuck them all around the room. Children grab 3 of those from around the room. On the back of those post-it notes, you also write a price for that item as well. So we're tying a little bit of maths in here as well. Children, once they've got their 3 post-it notes, will then write those items in a list within a sentence. So it could be, could you get me some? And then the 3 post-it notes that they've chosen. Then they will turn those post-it notes over and have a look at the price of each item. They total all of those up, and then the person who has spent the least amount wins the game. So reinforcing commas in a list and also some maths. On to the next one. This one is to indicate parenthesis within a sentence, and basically parenthesis is just some extra added bit of information. If we took that out of a sentence, the sentence would still make sense, but it's giving us a little bit more detail. So for an example of this would be, London, the capital of England, is famous for Buckingham Palace. And I've come up with a game called Sentence Roll to help with this one. And for Sentence Roll, you need 2 dice with pictures on each. Could be any pictures you like, objects. The children roll both dice and come up with a sentence that includes some extra information about the object on the first dice. So, for example, if I roll a picture of a cat and I roll a chocolate cake, my sentence could be, the cat, who didn't need any more food, pounced onto the chocolate cake. So you're including your 2 items from your dice and you're including a little bit of information that you're going to put your commas around because that's your parenthesis, your extra bit of information. Type 3 is when we separate direct speech from a reporting clause. For example, we need to leave in 10 minutes, comma, said Dad. This is quite a tricky one, and one of the best ways that I've found to teach direct speech and how to write it correctly with the correct punctuation is using the speech mark sandwich. You can find this resource on my website. You can download your own version of those images that you can see there, one with some sentences and punctuation on and one that you can write your own on. And this is great for not only learning about sentence punctuation, but then they can also think about where they would put the comma within that sentence to separate the direct speech from the reporting clause. Number 4 is to avoid ambiguity. This is basically confusion in writing. So if you've got the sentence, let's eat Sam, if you don't put any commas in it, then it sounds like poor Sam's going to get eaten. If we put a comma after let's eat, it means we're saying to Sam, let's go and eat some dinner or some lunch. So one of the activities I've come up with to make this a bit of a fun activity to think about avoiding ambiguity is to search for examples of road signs. There are loads of really funny ones online where either incorrect or no punctuation has been used. For example, the one that I'm showing you on the screen now. Once children have explored some of these and thought about where the missing punctuation is, can they then create their own road signs, one with the use of a correct comma and then one without the comma, and then perhaps draw pictures to represent what those two road signs might actually mean. Just a fun activity. Again, they can reinforce that actually when we don't have a comma, what the meaning could be in a sentence, and when we do have it, what the correct meaning would be. So that would come up with some nice pictures and a nice display for your classroom as well. And then the last one is to separate a main and a subordinate clause. So a subordinate clause doesn't make sense on its own, the main clause does. So for instance, when Sarah went to bed, she read to make herself sleepy. When Sarah went to bed, in this sentence is the subordinate clause, she read to make herself sleepy is the main clause. So we could play a game called Silly Sentences, where we write some main clauses and subordinate clauses on different pieces of paper, put them in 2 piles face down on your playing surface. Players then pick a main and a subordinate clause, read it aloud, it'll probably be a silly sentence, and then have a go at writing that sentence down and putting the comma in the correct place between those. So that's those 5 ways very quickly with what they are, some examples of each, and a game that you could play to help support those children in your class or at home with learning about those different types of uses for commas. And finally, you might like to take a look on my website for this revision game, which is called Comma Roll. It comes with a dice and the sentences that you can see in the picture. And this one, basically, they roll the dice. If they get on the dice, for example, after a fronted adverbial, they would then look at those sentences, see which one has a fronted adverbial in it, and then they have to put the comma in the correct place. And the first person to correctly punctuate all 6 sentences and roll the different types of commas will win the game. You can download that from my website as well. Hope you found that handy. A little bit over 5 minutes, so I'll try and be quicker next time. But lots of different ways that we would use, and children will be taught about commas in Key Stage 2.